seated. So before we begin deliberations, I'd like to turn the floor over to Councillor Hinks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just thought it was necessary that I say something today. During my recent illness, I was overwhelmed with the amount of support and well wishes I had from a lot of people in the community here and in the community. And I especially want to thank the Mayor and my colleagues on City Council for all the support that you gave me, and both morally and with the workload and everything else. And the City Clerk and your staff, I'm really grateful for all the help you gave me. And Mr. Davies, you and your staff, thank you very much for being the guy you are. Thank you. And and just as citizens in Regina in general, I was overwhelmed by the amount of support and calls I got and the whole thing. And this is a very caring community, and I really found that out going through all this. And just to let you know a little bit about me, my treatment, it was successful, and I don't know if I'm going to have any further yet. I'm kind of back here 3 weeks earlier than I'm supposed to be, but I plan to transition my way back because I can't handle sitting at home and seeing you guys have so much fun here. So I just want to be where the action is. Anyways, thanks everybody. I'm very grateful for all the support, and just thanks. I'm humbled by all of it. Thank you.
Councillor Hinks, I can speak for the rest of council when I say that we're very, very pleased to see you back. Great to see you here. You're a fighter, strong individual, and we're very, very proud of you. So with that, we'll take a motion to adopt the agenda with the addition from the clerk's office.
I will do that with the adjustment from the clerk's office. Thank you.
Seconder, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes for the last meeting.
I move the minutes from the last meeting.
Councillor Young moves those. Seconder, please.
Second the minutes.
Councillor Burnett, any errors or omissions on the minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, we'll move to our first order of business, advertised bylaws and related reports. Delegation 13-63, Lauren Yagelinski. Good evening, Mr. Yagelinski. You know the drill. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions from members of council afterwards.
Your Worship, members of City Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight on our zoning application for the Green Zone Gardner Phase 4, bylaw number 2013-32, and concept plan amendment, bylaw number 2013-34. My name is Lauren Yagelinski. My company, Yager Development, is the development manager and for the owners of the Green Zone Gardner. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of a favorable approval of the zoning of the Green Zone Gardner Phase 4 and our concept plan amendment for the Green Zone Gardner. We are in favor of the report from City Administration and Regina Planning Commission. We would like to thank the Administration and Planning Commission for dealing with our application in a very timely and positive manner. As City Council already knows, we are dealing with very positive growth in the City of Regina, and I would like to publicly thank City Council for the positive growth initiatives it has taken for the past few years to make Regina truly on the global map. I would like to thank the Mayor and City Council for hosting the Housing Summit a few days ago. I attended and was very pleased with the ideas presented and look forward to doing our part in solving some of the housing issues in Regina. We can only do so much as a developer, but we need a positive environment from the city to attract jobs and investments to our city. I deal daily with people who have moved to Regina from all parts of the world, and I truly get a good vibe we are on the right track. In response to our application, the Green Zone Gardner is turning out to be an amazing development. Our dream a few years ago to have a diverse population with all market segments welcoming the Green Zone Gardner as home. I'm happy to report that with the city's help, we are reaching our expectation of a wonderful, diverse new community. Green Zone Gardner Phase 4 adds some additional product diversity to the greens, with product ranging from single-family lots to semi-detached units, as well as street townhomes, which is a new product in the Green Zone Gardner to further enhance affordability. The zone level park and high schools have been removed and to a more central location further to the north of the Green Zone Gardner. This was done at the request of the school boards in consultation with the city and us as the developer. As a result, the concept plan has been amended and we have added additional mixed-use sites that will form the hub of the Green Zone Gardner. The mixed-use sites will include small ground floor commercial with condo units above on the second and third floors. The benefit of this type of development is that this also adds vibrancy to our community, but also helps with affordability, as you can have commercial and condo units above on the same piece of land. This type of development is definitely the way to go now and in the future. The slight increase in density on our multi-sites also creates more affordable units, and we welcome this type of development in the Green Zone Gardner. The concept plan amendment also adds a seniors care site to our plans, as well as 2 new sites to accommodate rental apartments, approximately 300 units. We also have a builder for both the senior site and the apartment rental sites as we speak. We presently only have a few lots left for sale in the Green Zone Gardner, and respectfully request City Council approve our rezoning application tonight, as well as our concept plan amendment. We really need this phase approved and developed so we can satisfy the market demand for homes in this area of the city. The concept plan adds another exciting element of diverse housing up to the Green Zone Gardner to help the current demand for all forms of housing in the city. We are pleased with the cooperation of the city to allow the Green Zone Gardner to evolve into a new community. We are pleased as a developer that City Council considers amendments as plans evolve. This truly makes a difference to the final outcome of a new community, rather than being stuck in a plan that does not respond to the market. We feel the proposed amendments actually make the plan better, and ask the support of City Council to our application tonight. Thank you for your time, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have on our applications.
Thank you, Mr. Jagolinski. Any questions? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Worship. Good evening, Mr. Jagolinski. We had a long discussion at Planning Commission about this area, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to expand a little bit from your comments so that everybody understands what it is that you would hope to accomplish here. One, can you first of all tell us where the Green Zone Gardner are located?
Okay. Through you, Your Worship, thank you very much. Well, first of all, the Green Zone Gardner is located in the southeast part of the city. It's directly north of Arcola Avenue and directly east of the existing Windsor Park.
Thanks. So one of the things that was clear in your presentation and is clear in the document that will be before us is that you've changed density and changed the type of housing. So let's begin with rental accommodation. Could you expand upon what is planned for here?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. When we started off the concept plan for the Green Zone Gardner, basically it was all single-family homes with normal density that we're used to over the last number of years. And with recent demand in the marketplace for people coming to Regina and the lack of affordable housing, it became quite evident to us that it would be an important element if we want to truly cater to all aspects of the market to have rental apartments in our project. So we dealt with a local builder developer that builds apartment rentals, and we strategically located in a location that was satisfactory to them and worked on a design that met our values as far as the type of building we'd like to see in the area, and it's truly an additional welcome to the Green Zone Gardner. It's an important element of having diversity in your community. So there's approximately 300 units that aren't part of this application, but will be coming. It's already been to Planning Commission, will be as part of our next Phase 5, which will be before Council on I believe it's June 21st.
Thank you. Your Worship, I wonder if I could have a visual a little bit. You mentioned about ground floor commercial and above a 2-story condo. I think a little bit about what's over in on Broad Street and College Avenue and what's going in the Anglican Archdiocese. Would that be a similar build here?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. I'm also part of that project, and it's proving out to be we're very happy the way that's turning out. And a few years ago, it would be virtually very difficult to combine the 2 types of uses in a particular part of the city. So that was kind of our first example of it. And we really feel there, again, to attack affordability and have 2 types of uses on one piece of property further enhances from 2 points of view. One, it makes the commercial more affordable because you also have condos above to support the cost of servicing the land and the land purchase. And as well, it adds an element that allows you to bring diversity to your community, where you can have some local. We're trying to get a gymnasium into our community. We're getting like a little local coffee shop, small little local offices to further enhance the idea of walkability and having those type of services within your own community, trying to incorporate transit service into this area as well, so that, again, adds that element of diversity and affordability to the community. And I think that's the way to go in the future. It's sometimes hard to do this in the suburbs because you have to have a demand for retail. It's not really retail. You have to have a demand for that commercial space. And right now, the demand for commercial space, not only from retail, but we're getting, like, as the example, a gym who wants to locate in there. It's really not a retail, but it's a good use for our community. We got lots of those kinds of uses coming to us that will actually help support the community as it grows.
Thank you.
So we're really excited about that.
Perfect. So if I could add to that, Your Worship, so in relation to what you just described, what about the seniors area? Is this adjacent to this? Is walkability for them as well?
Yes, through Your Worship. These are all very good questions. As part of the plan along Chuka Boulevard, to create Chuka and to be a very interesting street and to have this as a viable option, we've also added that dimension of on one side of the street would be the rental project. On the other side of the street was basically a seniors development, a fairly large project. The new thinking on seniors development is more to integrate it into the community, to have a little bit of ground floor commercial in that building as well, to have seniors feel more like they're integrated into the community versus them being in a building that feels too institutionalized. So we're working with a developer from Toronto on this one. It's kind of their lead example of how they want to do seniors developments for the future. They're doing one in Regina. This would be their first one. They own two other ones in the city of Regina right now. And this would be their third one. And they hope that this will be an example of how future retirement living homes, they're trying to put in their own community that they're building. It's a 7-acre site that they're looking at acquiring from us. They're again offering full service if somebody needs it, and some of them will be handled almost like condos. If you need meals, you can get that, as well as if you got somebody living in there and you want to meet your parents or anybody that's in that facility for a coffee, they could go downstairs, and it's part of that community. As well as we've incorporated along the design of Chuka Boulevard, bus stop will be part of our, there again, the details of that will be coming to you guys on June 21st. It has that additional element to support what I just mentioned a couple minutes ago about the commercial and the diversity. So the rentals, the seniors, we basically got the whole gamut in the greens. And it's not just a plan, it's for real. We have customers and we have developers from outside that are going to build these projects, and they're not figments of our concept, they are for real. So we're really excited about that.
Perfect, thank you very much. So one more question. You used the word walkability in our discussion at Planning Commission. We also talked about bike paths and so on. So could you describe, if you don't mind, a little bit about the street circumstance that you see in this area?
Yes, through your worship, as part of the evolution of the Greenstone Garden, we started off the first phase with understanding that walkability and safety is very important. So we did a lot of separated sidewalks and on-street greenways, whereby we widened the sidewalks in some instances up to 8 feet, and in a pattern that basically takes it down some streets, through the park, down to our mixed-use commercial area, what we're talking about, down to the major north-south street, which will become Chuka Boulevard, and to make that street more functional even than what is normally done on that type of street. We don't want it to be just a busy jump on the street and get through it as fast as you can. So what we've incorporated is bike lanes on both sides of the street on the actual asphalt, so that if you really want to truly promote walkability and biking, we've incorporated that ties into our pathways. We're going to, in front of our commercial buildings, we've actually worked with the city administration to take some of the sidewalk that would be normally done on the street and get it as close as possible to the storefronts, to there add interest. And to make a community walkable, it's got to feel good, it's got to be landscaped nice, and it's got to work. It can't be conflicting with traffic. So the street, we have the opportunity in this case to properly design it right from the get-go. And even though it's not a requirement as part of that street, I firmly think is really, really important to start as we're doing some of these major roadways, such as Chuka Boulevard, to incorporate right at the beginning. It's an extra cost that we're prepared to look after, incorporating the bike lanes to add that walkability, even though it's not walkable, and that's going to lead further all the way to the north into the future project to the north.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. You can return to the gallery and we'll look at the next report before us.
Thank you very much.
Your Worship, I'm just going to give you a little heads up. We're going to handle this on the fly a little bit. Application for a zoning bylaw amendment, concept plan amendment, and official community plan amendment, the Greens on Gardner concept plan phase 4 development. On the overall development as you have it in front of you, you'll note the questions that I asked Mr. Jagelneski. I wanted him to describe really and truly what is going on there and what is planned. And you can see that there's been a number of adjustments if you followed the original plan to what is being proposed for the future. That's the first part. The second part, there's also lands to the north of this plan, this concept plan, that will now host some of the other projects that were originally planned for in here. So there's been a number of changes. Now, my plan, Your Worship, is I want to give others, if they wish to speak to the overall plan. I have some changes to the recommendations, but I'd like to do that separately if anybody else wants to speak to what's here.
So you're going to amend the report at some point?
I will in a moment.
Okay. Notice has been given. That will be in the closing of debate then. Councillor O'Donnell, questions or comments on the report? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a quick question for the administration. So we're moving a park and a school site to an adjacent neighborhood that's yet to be. Just wondering if you can explain, I mean, obviously the price of that factors into the price of home ownership in these different neighborhoods. So how do we, given that this neighborhood will be using those services, but it won't be part of this development, can you just explain how that relationship works? Thanks.
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, that will likely form part of the amendments related to Councillor O'Donnell that he alluded to. In general, what we're looking at here is the relocation of that based on a broader plan that the developer, Mr. Jagelneski, has been working with the adjacent property owners, but there's been some ownership change in the property, so it's quite likely that the amendments that we're looking at tonight would be holding off on that until we could come to some agreement on the larger plan in terms of where those would be relocated to. So I think that's the status of that right now.
Thank you.
Councillor Fraser?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we work in conjunction with the school board to determine a final site for a school, is that right?
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, yes. So we had a design charrette of this whole area, the Greens on Gardner, the towns to the north, right up to Victoria Avenue, and the school boards were in attendance and were working on that. So that was the impetus for some of the relocation, or future potential relocation of the school sites, was to a more central location within that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments about the developer and what he's done for this particular development. And I like what he's done because he's changed with the times. I mean, Councillor O'Donnell asked about a bunch of the same questions I was going to ask regarding where did you see the plan going when you first started to where it is today. And he's adapted greatly to what the city needs and moved a lot of things forward. Going to start with some, I don't know, for lack of a better word, granny suites coming down the road here shortly with their more housing and, running different types of streetscapes, different types of things, changing it, going commercial. I know he's worked with College and Broad, the developing of that area too, and he's implemented some of that stuff into the Greens on Gardner. I'm not going to speak on the amendment right now because I want to wait till that one comes out. But just in his, what I'd like to see is that this thing move forward and be taken, and then allow him to respond and adapt to the changes that may come with an amendment. Because he's put a lot of work into this, and I hope it's not. I hope this amendment isn't going to stall anything that he's worked on in the last 5 years to go and move this project forward. So that's my only concern whenever I hear an amendment. is that we backlog the administration, we slow down the development, we change everything, and then we're sitting here 6 months later talking about the same thing again because one particular person or somebody didn't like something that was changed. So hopefully we can move this all forward and approve it and then deal with an amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Other speakers to the main report? If I have Councillor O'Donnell stand, he is closing debate. We will debate an amendment on that. Councillor O'Donnell.
Okay, so I'll just go back and just make sure that you understand it. When we looked at this at Planning Commission, we probably spent 2 hours on this and other aspects of this program. So this has been well feted at that level. So I have a couple of recommendations. As you heard Mr. Carlson say, there's been a change of land ownership. And so the land ownership effects where some of the amenities that I will speak to could be located, may be located, and without some proper consultation, we don't want to assume that, shall I say, at this point in time. So I'll do these in order, if I could. The first one is recommendation number 1 be tabled, and it specifically talks about the multi-seasonal zone level athletic park be developed in the southeast sector and be co-located with the future high school in consultation with the school boards. Specifically, this is now to the north of this plan, and because that land has changed and because the city is affected by that, I'm asking that that specific recommendation be tabled.
So the amendment is a table. There's no debating a table in motion. Seconder for the...
I'll second it.
Councillor Hinks seconds that. We all understand the purpose and the rationale for the amendment. It's not debatable, but to understand the purpose of it, I will allow that because this is quite different than what is the report before us. Are we all clear? No. Councillor Bryce?
I'm
Question
just wondering,
on...
is it tabled forever, or is there a certain time frame?
Oh. Councillor Dowell, get to the next meeting.
Ideally, I'm going to say for a month. That's off the top of my head, but it's not meant to be long.
Councillor Flagel. Sorry, Councillor Bryce, are you okay? Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. Tabling of this amendment regarding the athletic sport park, is that going to affect the rest of the thing moving forward? Is my question. I think we need to have...
On a secret clarification, you can't debate that, but I'll get a clarification from the administration. Mr. Carlston.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. There's basically two components of this. There's elements in which the developer will be proceeding with development and rezoning and subdividing, and those are identified in recommendation number 3, identifies all of those areas. So we're suggesting to proceed with those. What Councillor O'Donnell has proposed to table is some future work, some future planning within the Greens on Gardiner. Now, just the background on that, the seasonal zone level athletic park and the school sites, through the workshop that we undertook with the property owners in that area, we looked at relocating that. Now, with the property ownership change, we need to just go back to the new property owner and confirm the plan that was drafted to ensure that there's some agreeability from the new property owner to ensure that this is feasible. In other words, that plan that has been drafted, and we have some sort of handshake types of agreements on, hasn't been approved by council. So we just want some assurances from the new property owner that we will be able to relocate these appropriately elsewhere.
You okay with that, Councillor Flagel?
I'm not 100% clear on that, but that's okay. I'll deal with it. Thanks.
Okay. Other questions of clarification only? Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Just checking with the administration, as our only City Council meeting in June is June the 10th, and I expect that that is too soon. If I were to word this that it was being tabled until July, is that sufficient?
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, that would be fair.
Okay. That would be part of your amendment, Councillor O'Donnell? That would be good. Okay. I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor O'Donnell.
I have more. Number 2, I would also like to, with explanation, please, table number 2. You will note that table number 2, recommendation number 2, please, that the application to amend the Greens on Gardiner concept plan as depicted is not complete at this point in time, so I'd like to table that Having said that, I want to be clear that you will note in items number 3, all of those lots, all of the residential detached, direct control districts, semi-detached, medium density, and so on, are not affected by what I'm suggesting. So I'm looking to recommendation number 2, please.
It follows from table number 1 that table number 2 should happen. Okay, and the table motion, seconder for that, please.
Worship, I'm going to second that, but I just want to clarify that when you called the question, you called the question on the amendment, but you actually intended the tabling motion of the first part? Okay, just the reference was amendment. I know what you meant.
No, it's the tabling of the first recommendation.
Right, so just out of clarity, though, that we did move and we all voted in favor of the tabling.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's exactly what happened.
No, that's good. It's just that your comment was amendment, and I know you meant tabling motion, so I'll second the second motion now.
Okay. Any comments or questions on the tabling motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor O'Donnell.
If I could, I'd like to add a number, I think it's going to actually be number 6. And I'll just read it, and then I'll explain. And Madam Clerk, I'd be happy to read it a second time. That the only areas of the concept plan identified as Phase 4 or 5 be approved, pending Council's approval of the necessary amendments to Development Plan number 7877. That is the official community plan. So, in other words, now I'm being very specific and narrowing it down to exactly what can be approved. And that is the areas of concept plan identified as Phase 4 or 5, Madam Clerk. Please.
Okay. This is not a referral motion. It is up for debate. Are we all clear on this? Need a seconder for the motion, though?
I'll second it.
Councillor Hinks seconds that. Comments or questions on the amendment? This will facilitate the movement of this project. Councillor Flagel?
That was my question. Will this move forward based on what we have in front of us today? The developer needs to know what's coming down.
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, yes. So all of the development areas that are imminent to develop and be rezoned, the developer will be able to proceed with those, yes.
So if at the end of the day, at the end of tonight, he can move on Phase 4, and he can come back to us on Phase 5 in, is it June or July, I think? June 20, it's going to planning, I think, on the 21st of June, is it not? Phase 5?
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, he can go for Phase 4 and Phase 5. The part that's being tabled, or previously tabled, extended beyond that. So it wasn't part of the phased development. It was just an additional concept plan amendment.
Okay.
So he can proceed with Phase 4 and 5 straight to development.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel.
Thank you.
So we're clear on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor O'Donnell.
Last one on this one, please. I'd like to also add the next number, I think it's 7, that the proposed full amendments to the Development Plan Bylaw 7877, that is the official community plan, and the Greens on Gardner concept plan be considered at a future meeting of City Council, and we've agreed that to be in July.
Great. It's another amendment. A seconder for that, please.
I'll second it.
Councillor Hinks seconds that. Debate, comments on the amendment? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The report as amended. Yes. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. In taking a look at the remaining recommendations, I note that recommendation number 4 is still directing the city solicitor to prepare the development plan amendment in Part D, and I'm wondering if, in fact, we should amend that recommendation to remove that part of it.
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, I'd like to defer to Ms. Howerluck. I think she's working on the mechanics of...
Ms. Horlick?
Through you, Mr. Worship, the Section 4, the bylaw to proceed with Stage 4 and 5 is within the 2 bylaws that are coming forward, but we do need to table the development plan bylaw, so I would say this whole amendment would need, or pardon me, condition would have to be removed.
So recommendation number 4 would have to be removed.
Through the chair, yes. And at time when we come back in July, we'll have the other bylaws to move forward that are required to move the rest of the concept plan forward.
Okay, so we're all clear on this. We need perhaps a motion to delete recommendation number 4. Councillor O'Donnell? Just that portion of it?
Just that portion of number 4, I would so move.
Okay, a seconder, please. Councillor Hawkins, debate or discussion on this amendment? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The altered report as amended. Now, we did have the closing of the debate for Councillor O'Donnell, so I'm going to call the question on that, just on the report as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I hope that everybody in the audience understood that. It's a complicated process.
Worship, that just goes to show how much goes on, right?
That's right.
To get these things to happen, it's not that simple.
Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward, we have two bylaws, and one of them we're going to be tabling, so I'm going to look for a tabling motion on that. But the first one is 2013-32, and that it be introduced and read a first time, and that we table 2013-34.
Okay. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll amend this as we go along. This is an advertised report and bylaw, and so what I would like to do is advise the audience that the required advertising has taken place. As we are going to be tabling bylaw number 34, what I would do is ask if there is anyone in the audience who would like to come forward to speak to bylaw number 32. If you would like to do so, this would be your opportunity. There is no one, Your Worship, and I will do a subsequent call on 34 at the time that it returns to City Council.
Right. Okay. So the motion is the first reading and then tabling of 34.
Correct. That's correct, Your Worship.
Right.
That would be made by Councillor Fraser.
Councillor Fraser seconds that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I move second by Councillor O'Donnell that bylaw 2013-32 be read a second time.
Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I moved, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that Council hereby consents to bylaw 2013-32 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaw 2013-32 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We move on to report CR 1371. Councillor Murray.
Rise to bring forward the amendment to the Regina Administration Bylaw number 2003-69 regarding the purchasing policy. The recommendations that came to Executive Committee are two parts, that the subject of the required public notice having been given to the accordance of the public notice bylaw, the recommendation changes to Schedule D, and that the Regina Administration Bylaw number 2003-69 outlined in Appendix A within the report be related to the purchasing policy be approved, and a part two, that the City Solicitor be directed to prepare the necessary amendment bylaws for consideration by Council. Those would be the recommendations, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Other comments or questions on this report? Councillor Murray, if you could just take the chair for a moment, please.
I sure could. Your Worship.
Just a quick summary of this report. This is to allow the administration to go forward on electronic tendering through SAS tenders. And this is what's been recommended through the New West Partnership Trade Agreement, and will facilitate the opportunity to have tenders go electronically versus the more traditional way. It is what most municipalities have been doing, and indeed I think it's part of the requirement of that agreement that municipalities be aligned with this as of actually July of last year. So this is simply putting into force a practice right around the province.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. There's no other comments on the question, on the report. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. And let's see, we go to report 72.
Thank you. CR 13-72. On behalf of Public Works, I'll move that the Appendix A be amended by deleting work project number 18 and work project number 21. That the City Solicitor be directed to prepare a bylaw based on Appendix A to authorize the 2013 Local Improvement Program for consideration for City Council. And number 3, that the construction rates for alley lighting in the 2012 Local Improvement Program be revised in the Local Improvement Bylaw 2012 number 2012-37 to reflect the interest rate changes charge and the change in construction rate for alley lighting as described in Council Report CR 13-10. I understand we did debate number 1 of this recommendation at length at Public Works, and I understand that the City Councilor for the area has some amendments to make as well at this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move that an amendment to the recommendation. I'd like to move that we delete the recommendation number 1, that the Appendix A be amended by deleting Work Project 18 for Ray Street from 25th to 24th Avenue, and by deleting Work Project number 21 for Newton Crescent from Hudson Drive to Hudson Drive. In effect, Your Worship, I'm moving an amendment that deletes the deletion and restores the original recommendation that was before Public Works. If I can attract a seconder, I'll speak.
Seconder for that.
I'll second that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I can be brief on this. These two work projects are projects that desperately need doing. In both cases, we had a debate before Public Works, which was prompted by pushback from some residents along these two streets. As a result of that pushback and the discussion that we had in Public Works, it was moved to delete these two improvement projects. However, immediately after their deletion and upon notification of the residents, many got in touch with me, including some that had previously been in touch with me, objecting to the local improvements, saying basically, no, we need these local improvements. What we were objecting to was the cost. And it became clear that, in fact, the residents of the area, in both cases, very much want the local improvements to go ahead. And it's on that basis that I propose that we delete the amendment, thereby restoring the original recommendation, which would see the local improvements go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Any questions on the amendment? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Other speakers on the report as amended? I'll call the question on the report as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to move, second by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaws 2013-35 and 37 be introduced and read the first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Oh, yes. Yes. Madam Clerk, should have to do that first.
Thank you, Your Worship. City Council is considering the two bylaws, those being 2013-35 and 2013-37. Those deal with the Regina Administration Amendment Bylaw, so that deals with the ability to advertise our tenders electronically, as well as the Local Improvement Bylaw. These bylaws have been advertised in accordance with the legislation, but if there is anybody who would like to address City Council, I would invite you to come forward at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, this begin the process once again. I should have had the clerk speak it first.
Sure. Yeah, no, just due process. We'll make sure we do that correctly. So I'm going to repeat again that I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaw 2013-35 and 2013-37 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thanks, Your Worship. I move, seconded by Councillor Burnett, that bylaws 2013-35 and 37 be read a second time.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. So part of the change that's happened with 2013-35 is the limit at which we require a tender. It's been moved up to $25,000, which I understand is within line with other municipalities our size. I'm just wondering, what is the public accountability for tenders under that? If somebody from administration could comment. So tenders under $25,000, how do we, what's the public accountability for those tenders? Thanks. For those contracts, rather. Thanks.
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, I'd ask Mr. Markowicz to comment on that.
Mr. Markowicz.
Your Worship, the accountability is that there's still a competitive process. It's just not a formal contract A or a competitive, formal competitive process. Again, verbal or written quotations, but no contract A.
Presumably that's all accessible through open government.
Mr. Markowicz?
There's still, through Your Worship, still an open book. It's transparent.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any for that? Call a question on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Your Worship, I rise to move, seconded by Councillor Young, that Council hereby consents to the bylaws 2013-35 and 37 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Bryce, that bylaws 2013-35 and 2013-37 be read a third.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I move on to delegations and related reports. Adam Sperling, D 1364. Good evening, Mr. Sperling. If you could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and maybe questions from members of council after.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Adam Sperling. I am the owner of La Bodega and Slow Pub, and I have had La Bodega for 13 years, going on 14. And I am here not to oppose the nightclub, but to oppose the city making exceptions for more than just one bylaw. And I believe that the city has...
Mr. Sperling, if you just read your presentation for us, please, if you don't mind.
Could I just read my presentation?
Just read the presentation if you don't mind. Yes, that'd be helpful.
Well, just read the letter that I...
Well, the one that you submitted to council last week?
Yeah.
That would be the one, if you could read that, please.
I can read that. 1 second, sorry.1 second. Regarding the discretionary use permit for application 13DU04. One of the most talked about issues in Regina, and certainly in the last City Council meeting, is parking. The previous business based in the proposed location had sufficient parking due to the hours of operation and the type of business, with an average customer visit lasting no more than 10 minutes. The loading zone in front of the building was sufficient. It is also beyond imagination that there would be 90 people plus staff conducting business at once at any given time. With many similar business in the area struggling to meet parking demands over and above the minimum required to obtain our permits legally. It is a challenge and a hardship to police each of our designated stalls already. The bylaw has a minimum distance requirement for a reason. After polling 100 of our customers, a great majority of them stated they would rather take a close spot and risk getting a ticket than walking from a designated parking lot. So the further the stalls, the less likely they would even be they would be used until all of their stalls are taken. Why rewrite a law to help one but hurt many? In a perfect world, people would not drive to drink and then drive home. However, the long winter months, it is unlikely that a significant number of patrons will walk to this location. And with fewer stalls available and more people, the lack of parking will eventually lead customers away from the area to a more accessible location. We will respectfully request to see any leases for parking that that are deemed to make the proposal compliant. We are also talking to the Chamber of Commerce about using the same stalls on a first-come, first-served basis. The Chamber of Commerce treats all of their members equally. It should also be noted the M-Park proposed as the off-site over distant parking was at full capacity on Friday, May 10th and Saturday, May 11th, between the hours of 8 and 11. So the argument about the space being underutilized is not always true. The second major issue addressed during our last meeting is that residential neighbors. Although we also cater to similar clients, we as a tavern never have loud music to disrupt the neighborhood. Also, no access to the rear of the building for patrons reduces nuisances even more. A nightclub, by definition, will be much louder and more boisterous, both musically and patrons. With rear parking being 50% of the proposed 100% of legal parking, they will have access through the rear, leading directly to the front door of their closest residential neighbor. The back alley of the nightclub is, I am sure, not where most people would choose to live. It is our understanding that the city has never given out a nightclub designation in a residential zone, especially when the neighbors are in opposition. Finally, during a phone call with myself in late April, Mark Andrews stated that he could not recommend approval since the plan failed to comply with bylaws, even though he was aware of ongoing construction taking place. However, showing further disrespect to the permitting and bylaws process, all interior renovations have been completed. We would like to understand how Planning Commission gave them authority to complete renovations before having any permits in place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Spurling, for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor Dowell?
Thanks, evening, Mr. Spurling. I just want to go backwards. You began with discussion on parking. So prior to this application, is parking a concern in the area?
Yes. Yeah, we're having cars towed regularly right now.
Okay. So regardless of this application, regardless of this one, do you see any other solutions that are possible in the area for increased parking?
I do, and I believe I believe that the city condemns houses for them being in disarray, and so why can't they condemn a contaminated lot at the end of the street and within 3 months have it cleaned up and turned into let's say a metered parking stall? I think you're collecting about $2,000 a month or $2,000 a year on that contaminated lot. With 60 metered stalls, I'm sure that would far exceed that.
Your Worship, just so I'm clear, I think you're referring to the lot on, if I'm not mistaken, 14th Avenue in Albert on the east side. Am I correct?
You are correct. But it is it's a case of the horse before the cart. The lot has to be finished before there's any additional businesses because it'll just hurt everyone.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Other questions of the delegation? There are none. You can return to the gallery and we'll now consider the report before us. So, Councillor Dowell, from Planning Commission.
Your Worship, before I do that, there is a piece of information, a letter that came. May I introduce that?
You can. That was actually circulated just prior to the meeting.
Yeah, so this item is CP 13-18. It is from John Hopkins, a discretionary use application, proposed nightclub for 2151 Albert Street. I think for the sake of argument, it would be useful to have this read into the record.
You want to move it as a communication, and I'll have a seconder, and then you can read that?
I would like to move it, please.
I'll second that communication, Your Worship.
Okay. All those in favor? All those carried? Go ahead.
Thank you. I think just for purposes of our discussion, I think this should be read. So it's addressed to members of Regina City Council, and I'll read the letter. I'm writing to clarify our parking arrangement with the proponents of the above stated discretionary use application. For the record, we have an agreement with our neighbors of 2151 Albert Street to use our 7 parking stalls, 6 that we own and 1 that we rent from the owner of 2143 Albert Street. During those times that are not considered normal business hours, which are typically after the hours of 7 a.m. and 5:30 p.m., Monday through Friday, we will allow the proponents to use our stalls. In addition, we have had a very preliminary discussion with our administration about the need for, that is your administration, pardon me, about the need for additional parking not only in this specific area, but other areas in the city where there are vacant lots that are underutilized. We are of the view that these lots may help to alleviate some of the ongoing concerns about parking availability. Respectfully submitted, John Hopkins, Chief Executive Officer, Regina Chamber of Commerce. So if I could, I will move to the report itself. The number is CR 13-73. It's an application for discretionary use, proposed nightclub and off-site caveated parking lot, 2151 Albert Street. There are two things noted in the title. One is the actual use of the building, and the second one is about off-site caveated parking, because in order to function as a business, in this case, as descripted, they need to have X number of parking stalls. The number happens to be 12. So the discussion was lively at Planning Commission, I want you to understand. And the gist of it, and I don't want to take away from, but I want to try and cut to the chase. One is that there were parking stalls alluded to as part of the chamber. You heard the letter. There was also a parking lot that is a in-park lot about a block and a half away from this establishment, where there are a certain number of parking stalls, and it's in the report. And the idea was that it could be shared because it's not being used by all of the businesses. The gentleman that appeared before us has a couple of establishments, and he uses those parking areas as well. Okay? So, in a nutshell, this is about parking. I'm sure that even you didn't hear much else in terms of the arrangement from the delegation. Question for the administration, if I could. One, has there been any work and without permits done on the building? If I could get that answer, please.
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, I might defer that to Ms. Wyatt.
Ms. Wyatt.
Your Worship, it's come to our attention there has been some minor cosmetic work done to the interior of the building. We were sending an inspector to follow up, and we'll be informing the applicant to cease all work till they have a valid building permit.
Okay. Thanks for that. Second thing is about, and it was described by the delegation, I asked specifically for the location, that is that there is a derelict piece of land on 14th and Albert. It's been almost all of my life a derelict piece of land. It used to be a service station, if I remember correctly. It was a Texaco service station, actually. So what's the status of that? What does it mean to all of a sudden create a parking lot there?
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, first of all, the city doesn't own that property.
Okay.
I think it's owned by Imperial Oil.
Okay.
Yeah. So it would be considered contaminated, so there would have to be remediation by the owner before they bring it up to whether it be a parking lot commercial standard or anything higher.
Okay. So to follow that through, what's our role when it comes to those types of properties? So if it is contaminated, we want to see it revived. Do we have a role, or is that strictly at the discretion of the owner?
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, it's mostly at the discretion of the owner in terms of the timing at which they want to develop. We can only ensure that they maintain the property in good standing in terms of taxes and property maintenance.
Okay, thanks. So maybe if we could also, so that the rest of council understands about requirements for parking and caveated parking and so on, could you describe the situation that these people have to abide by if they're going to be considered?
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, for that, I think I'll defer to Ms. Howerluck, Planning Director.
Thank you.
Ms. Howerluck?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, through the bylaw, they can enter into off-site caveated parking arrangements, which would be put on title to meet their parking requirements. Currently, they need 12 parking spots, and they only have 3 on site.
So am I correct that they have 3 on site plus 7 from the or commitment from the chamber now?
Ms. Howerluck?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's my understanding also.
Okay. So they are short 2, and in order to meet the requirements, do those 2 parking spots have to be within a certain distance, like a block and a half, or 3 blocks, or 5 blocks? Is there limits or restrictions on that, please?
Ms. Howerluck?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, they are supposed to be within 30 meters from the subject property. The in-park lot that they are looking at getting the off-site caveat from is 75 meters away.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I wanted to present what's going on here. I am going to, you understand, I guess clearly that Planning Commission look for concurrence on this matter. I have other comments that I'm going to make, but I'm going to save it to the end.
You're going to be closing debate. Other speakers to the report then? Councillor Bryce?
Thank you. I'd like to know, I know we have information about, looks like an open house or public consultation. So I'd like to have more information about what the neighbors have to say about this. The residential neighbors, not necessarily the business ones.
Ms. Horlick?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the government agencies were notified, and there was no comments from the public and separate school boards. However, we did have comments at the public consultation where 6 people were opposed, and it had to do with increased perceived crime in the neighborhood, limited parking, and alcohol-only establishment will increase in inebriated individuals, which could cause safety concerns. There was 1 person who accepted if features were a little bit different, and 7 that could support the proposal. So at this point in time, we looked at the comments and the type of use and where it's located in the MAC zone, and indicated that we could support the application, as the applicants are in a zone that this type of use could be located in, and also that in these types of establishments, traffic, as we said, with people drinking, a drinking establishment, that they should be taking cabs and those sorts of uses to get home through cabs and public transportation. So we felt that the concerns were addressed.
Councillor Price?
Thank you. Is the area around with the residential area, is that permit parking or is it open parking for anybody?
Ms. Wyatt?
Your Worship, Albert Street itself is a bus lane at certain times of the day, so prohibited parking, but that is done at 6 p.m. And the neighborhood to the east is a mix of open parking and 2-hour parking, depending on which streets.
Okay, thank you for that. And the previous delegation stated that the chamber would allow any of their members, they can't really show favoritism between one and the other. So does that change the recommendation, because they may not have these 7 spots open because other of their members may get use of them? Like if they sent this letter to all of their businesses around the area, does that change how we feel about this?
May I respond to that or not?
Councillor Dahl, go ahead.
I'm going to read the statement in the letter. Yeah. For the record, we have an agreement with our neighbors at 2151 Albert Street to use the 7 parking stalls.
If I could just add to that too, I spoke with Mr. Hopkins today because I wasn't clear. He said emphatically they are dedicated to this application.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to to clarify that.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I guess I'll allow my thoughts just to stand, but my concern was if a patron chose to drive, parked in one of the chamber spots, ended up consuming too much alcohol and chose to take a cab, an alternative way home, but left their vehicle there, it really it's up to the chamber then to deal with that. They may have to tow a patron's vehicle away if they come the next morning, it's still there. So I guess it doesn't really matter to us. So I'm in favor. I'm concerned that that potentially could cause some challenges for the chamber. But if they're willing to accept that, then I'm happy to accept their involvement. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions or comments on the report? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you. To you, Mr. Mayor. Beyond housing, I think parking downtown is a really critical issue. I'm just wondering, given that the parking requirement has been met by a lot that's farther than the limit away, 70 meters away, is that right? I'm just wondering, is there any caveats we can put on that around, staff from this place parking in that lot versus the closer lot, or signage or anything like that? Does the city have any powers in that regard?
Ms. Horlick?
Through the chair, it would have to be on site. We could make that recommendation, but it would be their requirement to do that. In this case, they only have 10 stalls, and they still require 2 more stalls. So we would actually have to go to the appeal board.
But I understand there's also some stalls secured but farther away than the limit. Is that right?
Ms. Horlick?
Through the chair, yes. If it's off-site caveated, yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it will have to go through
Sorry.
the appeals
No,
board?
I apologize.
Okay,
No.
okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. I want to go back to the Texaco, and you're right, it is a Texaco, or was at that time. We have probably 15 of those lots in the city in various locations. Do we not have certain timelines in bylaws that state after so many years you must clean up, develop, resell, whatever? Because, I mean, eventually, more and more and more of these places are going to be vacant, and we're going to be able to do nothing with them 30 years from now. It's going to be sitting here. Can we not even develop something to force the SOs of the world and all these guys? Because it's just going to deteriorate our city. And I want to know if we have anything in place or could put something in place.
Don't think we have everything in place now, but Mr. Carlson, you can answer that question.
Your Worship, no, we don't have anything in place, whether it be incentive programs or any bylaws that would require it. And though the land economics of the day are increasing, so it may reach a point at some point in the future where incentive programs might be viable to sort of give it that kickstart, to put it over the top and make it financially viable. But currently we don't. I don't know if Mr. Barr would have anything to add beyond that. No?
So if I could, Mr. Mayor, if it's not disturbed, is it still a environmental hazard to the city of Regina that we can't force the issue on SO or whoever it is, Shell, whatever?
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, from our understanding today, no, we don't have any type of hammer to force an issue related to that until there's some sort of development or an adjacent development that may be impacted by any type of leaching.
I.e. a parking lot adjacent to a development, a business? I only asked the question because this is a problem that we've got in the city. I mean, we have another spot on, it was Osler and 12th Avenue. There's been a former business there it's been vacant for 20-some years, and it's useless land because of the chemicals that were put there. Could we not develop a bylaw or a stipulation that says after 10 years, you have to either forfeit the land, clean it up, because in this particular case and in, I'm picking a couple other ones, could we not put a skim surface on top?
We're actually, your points are very well taken. We're actually deviating away from the report, which is that property for development, not the lot. So we'll have to,
but I'm getting at this one right now.
Okay, we'll do it because otherwise I'll call you out of order.
I know. Can we not, in this particular case, that spot on 14th and Albert, could we not put a skim coat of asphalt on and use it as a parking lot, undisturbing the land below?
Mr. Carlson.
Your Worship, I don't think the answer or response will be fully satisfying, but I think for the point in time right now, there's nothing we can do with that lot that would help this situation with this application at this time.
Okay.
There may be some future work to be done in terms of how we deal with these types of small brownfield sites, but I think at this time there's nothing we can do in the immediate future.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Other speakers before I turn this over to Councillor Dowell? Councillor, can you take the chair, please?
Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Just one comment to Councillor Flagel. This is an issue across the city, no doubt about that. But we don't have the lever to any lever at all. But SUMA, with the provinces talking about how these orphan lands that need remediation, particularly former gas station sites, are dealt with, it's more of a provincial issue than certainly a city issue. So we simply don't have the capacity or the legal ability to enforce any change to that unless we bought the land, which I'm not in favor of buying the land to put a surface parking on. But I share your concern, Councillor Flagel. I'm going to speak in favor of this development. I'll do so because it's recommended firstly by Planning Commission. There's cave-aided off-site parking, and it is not that far from the site. And I want to note again that the Chamber of Commerce has dedicated its parking stalls to help meet the basic requirements of parking for this development. This is a commercial area, max zone. This is a discretionary use, wholly in keeping with what is allowed under discretionary use. It is a bit of an innovation and change, certainly from what's happening on that part of Albert Street. But it is the market talking about what they want to see. So I will certainly be supporting the recommendation. Thank you. Councillor O'Donnell will close debate.
Thanks very much. If I could carry on our deviation a little bit. On this Friday, I've been invited to a national teleconference, and in Vancouver in June on the 3rd, I will be sitting down with a group of people because we want to advance the Green Municipal Fund. That is some money that was provided by the federal government to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities with this expressed view that we can change some of these brownfield sites. So there is some money that is there. The idea is to come up with a plan as to how we in fact can implement this. What's really neat is that this money sits with FCM right now, and it's up to us as an organization, us meaning all of us, to make sure that we can find a plan. So on the short term, we need to do some things with brownfield. That does not help this situation. To this specific situation, no different than what you said, Your Worship, this is a business that I think belongs in the area. There are other karaoke singing areas. They make noise. There are other restaurants. People come and go. There's an awful lot of business going on here, and it helps to make the area thriving. I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. On the report, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move to Finance and Administration. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward CR 1374, and this is the purchase of some property at 1675 Winnipeg Street. Now, the recommendations are 4 parts, and they're a little bit into definition of the land itself. But the proposed purchase of 1675 Winnipeg Street is Parcel C within the northwest quarter section of 20 Township 17 Range 19 west of the 2nd Meridian. Information Services Parcel number 11134550. So if everyone's following along, that property is outlined in the body of the report here. Part 2, that the Deputy City Manager of Community Planning and Development be authorized to resolve the final terms and conditions for the purchase agreements and the purchase of that property outlined within this report, and that the City Clerk be authorized to execute the purchase agreement documents after reviewing with the City Solicitor. And Part 4, the City of Regina provide $1,050,000 plus GST to the purchase of the property outlined in the report, with $892,500 from the servicing agreement fees to the Roads Fund and $157,500 from the General Fund Reserve. Your Worship, this land is located just along. If you take a look at the amendment, that's not amendment, but the attachment that's on there, this land is right on the corner of Sass Drive and Winnipeg Street, and was part of an original right-of-way that traveled through there. And of course, it was sometime in the 80s, I think, that Sass Drive was built. I wasn't paying that close attention to the roads being built at that point, but this would allow it to carry on into the future. So that's the reason for the purchase, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments on the report? Councillor Fraser.
Quick question to you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks. Just with all this talk about gas stations, this is a former gas station site. So could you just confirm that the price we'll be paying will be for clean and ready-to-use land? Thanks.
Mr. Carlson.
Your Worship, Mr. Barr is here to speak to any land valuation questions.
Through your Worship, the value is established. Basically, the city had approached the owner a number of years ago to purchase the land, and the owner was not interested in selling at that time. The owner has recently received an offer to purchase, and he's given the city the first right of refusal at the same price. So the price was set on the market by another purchaser looking at the same property.
Okay, and are we confident that there's not going to be any other charges with getting this ready to become a roadway?
Mr. Barr?
Through your Worship, there would be some soil that would need to be removed in any event for a roadway, but as far as we know, there's nothing that's going to require further costs.
I presume there's some testing that has to happen either way. Is that true, or?
Ms. Wyatt?
Your Worship, I think we'll have Ms. Wyatt speak to that engineering perspective.
Your Worship, this is the first phase. It was going to be a multi-phase design for this eventual roadway, which would include geotechnical testing, environmental testing. As Mr. Barr correctly noted, we believe that most of the soil will come out as part of the roadway construction to get it to what would be an appropriate standard for future paved driving surface.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Marie, do you want to move this report? It's only a seconder for it. It's a communication.
Yeah, if I could, communication on the auditor's report, and it's a memo that's there. I just move, receive, and file.
Yes, receive and file. Seconder, please. Councilor Donald moves that. Okay.
Thanks, Councilor Donald. And this is just in regards to the independent auditor's report before us. So just moving, receive, and file, Madam Chair or Madam Clerk. That's correct?
That is correct. The actual report itself includes a recommendation that allows for the changing out of the reports once we have the finalized signed version. So this is in fact just showing what that report will look like.
Right. Okay. So it's currently be a draft form then, and it will become an actual form upon the signature on that. So
right now, this receive and file is communication.
So that's what I'm moving is communication. It's receive and file, Your Worship.
Any questions or comments on this? It's pretty straightforward. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Murray.
I rise to bring forward 1375, and this would be the 2012 annual report. And there's two parts, that the 2012 annual report be approved, and part two, that the Director of Financial Services be authorized to finalize the annual report, including the financial statements with the auditor. So, Your Worship, that would be the report, and as many are aware, at committee meeting we talked about the surplus that we found ourselves within, and of course that's within the body of this report. Again, through a number of good reasons, obviously careful planning, careful use of the taxpayers' dollars, but also through some, I guess there was some employment gaps that were left that we were unable to fill or couldn't fill in time, and that of course left us a little bit extra money on the table, but that gets of course put back into the process and takes care of the needs of the taxpayers.
And you're anticipating the next report as well, of course.
I guess
this is
I am.
76 as well.
I am, Your Worship.
Questions on the annual report for 2012? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Murray on the General Operating Fund for 2012.
Thanks, Your Worship. This would be the 1376, and this is a receive and file on the results of our 2012 operating fund, and again, that's what I was referring to, Your Worship. That'd be the recommendations coming from Finance Administration, Your Worship.
And this is receive and file. Questions on the report? I just asked the administration to speak to the issue of the origins of the surplus, what constitutes the surplus. Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, there's one primary element in terms of the surplus, which is essentially an increase in fees. Is the main element. So on the revenue side has caused most of the difference. In addition, on the revenue side, we had one-time gains from the sale of bonds of about $3 million. Generally speaking, there's some variations in accounts which were referred to. Overall expenditures were right on track for the year. So we're seeing growth in things such as building permits, development fees, landfill fees, transit and recreation related fees, which of course are most directly related to the growth in the community.
Thank you for that. Questions or comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. CR 13-77, which is car share parking space. So I'll move the recommendations from Public Works. The recommendation is that City Council authorize a single metered parking space on the ground level of City Hall Parkade to be reassigned to private parking for Regina car share vehicle. So this was brought forward to Public Works. Regina will be one of 27 communities who has a car share program, and we actually have 33 members in this Regina car share currently who share one vehicle in the City of Regina. So it's something that's innovative. It is environmentally friendly, obviously, and I look for support from my council members.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Comments on the report? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Just a question. In the report, it references that there is or was a parking spot at Stantec. Now there is this one. So there's one car. Is there just one parking spot in the city, or are there multiple? Like in other cities, you can drop it somewhere and keep on going. So I'm curious how that works.
Mr. Carlson.
Your Worship, this will be the second stall, so there'll be two total. One will remain at Stantec, and then this is, so 2 cars, 2 stalls.
1 car, 2 stalls. Ms. Harlech, you want to?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I asked that question this morning, and my staff indicated that it is an additional car also, so there'll be 1 part, so it's actually an upgrade, is my understanding from my staff.
So business is booming. Good. Other questions or comments on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are you going to close debate?
Yes, please. I'd like to close debate. And just to clarify, we were told at Public Works that they still have 1 car and they'll have 2 spaces. So, and that they're not in a position yet to expand to 2 cars, but that may be the future of it. So that's what we were told, just for different parking areas of the city. It will be dropped in 1 spot, and then the member of this would go online and book the car from wherever spot it is at. So just to clarify that, that's what they told us at Public Works.
Ms. Harlech, you want to?
Through the chair, I'll get clarification on that because I was given different information this morning, but I'll clarify it through a memo back to council.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bryce. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Murray, bylaws.
Thanks, Your Worship. I get to bring our last item before us tonight, and that is to move, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that bylaw 2013-36 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that bylaw 2013-36 be read a second time.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that Council hereby consents to bylaw 2013-36 going to 3rd reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Vendura, that bylaw. You know what? I left out Councillor Hinks out of this because it wasn't in my notes. But I'm going to throw that in there. Sorry, Johnny, I'm taking you out of this one here. So I move, seconded by Councillor Hinks, that bylaw 2013-36 be introduced and read a 3rd time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconder? Okay, Councillor Vendura, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening. And great to see you, Councillor Hinks. Great to see you.